Welcome to One Mic. I'm your host, Country Boy. Today we're going to talk about Ma Rainey. I got this idea watching Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, thinking that it was a biopic. So today we're going to discuss the actual history of Ma Rainey, and I hope you enjoy it. As usual, if you like this, you love this, please consider donating to our Patreon page. I also have a Buy Me Coffee page, which will allow you to give monetary donations. And if you love this, please consider reviewing us on Apple Podcasts. Please give us 5 stars. And without further ado, let's get started. Ma Rainey was an American blues singer known as the mother of the blues. She was recognized as one of the first professional blues vocalists. Born Gertrude Pridgett, she was born in Russet County, Alabama, or Columbus, Georgia, in either 1882 or 1886. One of 3 children born to Thomas and Ella Pridgett, Rainey began singing and performing at an early age. But her singing really took off in her early teens. Like many African Americans, she would hone her skills by singing in church. By the time that she was 14, Gertrude was on stage at a locally produced revue called A Bunch of Blackberries at the Columbus Springer Opera House. 2 years later, in 1902, Gertrude joined a tent show and began traveling on the road. And by 1904, she met William Pa Rainey, a song and dance man in the Rabbit Foot Minstrels. The two were married in February of 1904, and she became officially known as Ma Rainey, traveling throughout the South performing with Pa Rainey with the Rabbit Foot Minstrel Show. Minstrel shows were performed by black performances before black audiences, but ironically, they were copies of an entertainment form by whites for white audiences. The original minstrel shows were performed by whites in blackface and claimed to be an accurate representations of the song and dance of black African Americans in the South. After the Civil War, though, blacks took the minstrel shows and began touring the South, playing to poor sharecroppers under tents in fields, and by Gertrude's time, these tent shows had become standard entertainment forms for increasingly mobile black audiences, and the shows adapted their performances for stage in urban northern theaters. The Rabbit Foot Show was one of the most famous minstrel shows at the time, having been organized by entrepreneur F.S. Wilcox. The show toured the South, traveling by rail and performing under large tents with acts that included comedians, jugglers, novelty acts, and jungle scenes. At first, Ma and Pa Rainey were part of the after show, which was presented after the main act, but later they were added to the main bill. They performed with the band, and sometimes Ma would present a solo act, singing and dancing with a jug band named Madam Gertrude Rainey. Ma Rainey claimed to have discovered the blues in 1902 when a young girl came to her with a song of a lover who had disappeared. Ma said that she learned this song by heart and began using it as a part of her act's encore. She claimed that she spontaneously coined the term blues when someone asked her what kind of song it was. Ma Rainey was one of the earliest black performers to present the blues to large audiences, but she simply popularized a music form that has been in development for more than a half century. Originally, blues was recited as an improvised chant based on work songs or ballads for plantation-bound slaves. It was combined with African American spirituals and African musical customs, and the lyrics are often derived from heartache or some sort of struggle. The term blues is thought to be derived from the word blue devils, a term which African Americans used to express depression or great sadness. By the time Ma Rainey's young girl sang about her lost love, the blues would have already been well established, and even Ma Rainey herself would admit later that she heard similar songs in other places at the time. As blues grew in popularity, so did Ma Rainey's fame. Her voice was perfectly suited for the style which would be called down-home blues. Her voice was deep and sometimes described as harsh, but was ideally suited for the direct lyrics of the blues and was a great instrument to convey the depth of her songs about everyday life, pain, and emotion. Enthusiastic audiences agreed that no one could put across the blues like Ma Rainey, and in 1914, Ma and Pa Rainey joined Tolliver's Circus and Music Extravaganza and then billed themselves as Rainey and Rainey, assassinators of the blues. Their Their shows included chorus lines, acrobats, and comedy acts, and when Ma Rainey sang at the end of the program, she took the stage every bit the diva. She turned up with showy jewels, a diamond-like headpiece, necklaces made with cash and gold teeth to complement the gold gown that she wore. Rainey's comic banter between the songs was often vulgar and sexually frank, but offered great delight to the audiences, especially since Ma was readily admit that she was not an attractive woman. Musician Jack Dupree would take it one step further, stating that she was a really ugly woman, but when she opened her mouth, that was it. You forgot about everything. She knew how to sing the blues, and she stepped right into your heart. During the early years of Ma Rainey's career, her and Pa Rainey adopted a son, Danny, who joined the act as the world's greatest juvenile stepper. But Ma Rainey was the show, and by 1916, Ma Rainey began performing without Pa Rainey because the two had separated, and by 1920, Pa Rainey had passed. It was around World War I when Ma Rainey met and shared the stage with a woman that she would have a great influence on, Bessie Smith. The two most likely first encountered each other when they were both traveling with the Moses Stokes show in 1912. There were rumors that Ma Rainey and the younger Bessie Smith were lovers, and there was some evidence that Ma Rainey was inclined towards women. Rainey was arrested for throwing a women's-only indecent party in 1925, and when the officers arrived to the residence, they described that women were getting affectionate with each other and the party's host. Ma Rainey and Bessie Smith were very differently tempered. Bessie Smith was known for being hard drinking, sharp, and sometimes violent tempered woman, while Ma Rainey generally got along with everyone. Her trumpet player, Clyde Burkhart, in an interview said, "I never heard her curse or nothing like that. Ma Rainey acted like a religious person, and that's the way she appeared when you talked to her. She had a lovely disposition, and personality nonetheless." As World War I came to an end, the blues began taking the country by storm, especially after the release of the first known blues recording by a black artist known by the name of Mamie Smith. This record sold thousands of copies, and companies sprang up practically overnight to exploit a new phenomenon called race records. While blues singers quickly signed to recording contracts, Ma Rainey had to wait to 1923 before talent scout called Paramount Records to sign her. A part of the reason Ma Rainey's late entry into the recording business is because she sang an older, more southern style of classic blues that had already been eclipsed by a smoother, more sophisticated form developed in urban centers like Chicago or New York. And another reason for Ma Rainey's wait is that she continued to tour in rural areas in the Deep South well into the 1920s. She never had a white promoter and never developed a wealthier, more urban artist following that launched the careers of other acts. Additionally, Paramount was chronically on the verge of going bankrupt through the 1920s and was unable to take advantage of technical technologies in studio recording. Rainey was singing into old-fashioned horns and recording on wax cylinders long after everyone had moved to microphones and metal master disc, making her recording sound noticeably inferior to her peers. Nevertheless, Ma Rainey's first recording for Paramount Records was a hit, Blue Shine Blues. She then followed up with other hits, Bad Luck Blues, and those all night long blues. Rainey may have not been the first blues recording artist, but she was the most prolific. She went on to record 100 blues tracks over the next 5 years, expanding her audience well beyond the southern minstrel circuit to larger cities and more opulent settings. Paramount launched an aggressive advertising campaign for her first record under the headline, "Discovered at Last, Ma Rainey, Mother of the Blues." Between 1923 and 1928, Rainey rarely performed before white audiences, but she did perform before packed houses in American audiences in Chicago, Detroit, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, and New York with the Fletcher Henderson Band. But she never turned her back on the audience that had created her in the rural South. By the mid-1920s, Rainey was the lead star on the so-called Toby Tours, which played black theaters throughout the South, run by the Theater Owners Booking Association. By now, she toured with her own band called the Harmony Boys, the Jazz Jazz Hounds or the Jazz Wildcats, and she would open the show emerging from a giant record player, moaning and shimmying her way through her hit Moonshine Blues. The year 1928 was Ma Rainey's most successful, with 20 records for Paramount, a lengthy tour to the Midwest and the South with her Paramount Flappers, and the release of a popular song in February of 1928 called Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. The song was based on a decade-old dance by the same name, and the dance became so famous even white artists performed it, even though it was a sanitized version of the dance. And playwright August Wilson would use the phenomenon for his basis of his most notable play by the same name, which was first presented in 1984. By all these successes, the music business was rapidly changing. Old minstrel shows had given away to vaudeville after the First World War, and vaudeville was losing its audience to radio and film by the late 20s. The Theater Owners Booking Association had its worst box office year in 1927. Theaters that had played the packed houses were now closing, and more sophisticated audience began flocking to dance halls to hear jazz and a newer, more popular music called swing, which was a mix of jazz and blues. Although 1928 was Ma Rainey's best year in terms of popularity, 7 members of the show left because they had not been paid, and during the spring of the tour, Ma Rainey was forced to disband the company and join someone else's tour in order to keep working. Also in 1928, Paramount chose not to renew her contract, despite the slew of hits that she had performed for the record label. The final blow came during the Great Depression. The Theater Owners Booking Association circuit expired in the early 1930s, and Paramount Records, which released 100 race records in 1930, issued less than a dozen in 1931 and none the following year, and went bankrupt not long after. One of Ma Rainey's last tracks she recorded, Prove Me on the Blues, openly discussed her sexual orientation. She would state, "Went out last night with a crowd of my friends. They must have been women because I don't like men. It's true I wear a collar and a tie. It makes the wind blow all the while." In promotional images for the song, Ma Rainey was drawn wearing a suit and tie and speaking to a few women as policemen eyed her. The song alluded to the woman-only party that Rainey had threw in 1925. While the singer was not openly identified as a lesbian throughout the era, she was regarded as a gay icon today. Ma Rainey recorded her last number for Paramount, The Big Fillin' Blues, in 1928, and by 1930, she earned a living by appearing on traveling carnivals and what's left of the old tent circuit. Gone was the bus that she once toured with that she paid $13,000 in cash for. It was replaced with a car with a chassis that some friends had made from a house trailer. She made their own meals, had a small camp stove, improvised costumes, and bits and pieces from dresses that she had worn from her glory days, while Bessie Smith, Ethel Waters, and Alberta Hunter and other contemporaries made that transition from swing to bebop to radio and films and remained in limelight. Ma Rainey faded into obscurity. In 1935, after the deaths of her mother and her sister, Ma Rainey retired from show business and settled down in her hometown of Columbus, Georgia, joining the Congregation of Friendship Baptist Church, where her brother was the deacon. More the business person than she was given credit for, Ma Rainey had saved enough money from her stage days to buy 2 theaters in nearby Rome, Georgia, the Lyric and the Air Dome, which she managed into her death from heart disease in December 22nd, 1939. She had outlived Bessie Smith by 2 years, who was fatally killed in a car crash in 1937, and on her death certificate, it lists her occupation as housekeeper. Most of Ma Rainey's Paramount recordings remain on the shelf for the next 25 years, almost impossible to remaster because of the poor quality. But starting in the 1950s, when technology became more advanced, many of her old recordings began to revive interest in the blues during the 1970s. She may have been a singer, but Ma Rainey's had a major influence on black literature and drama. Poets Langston Hughes, Sterling Allen Brown alluded to her in their work, and August Wilson's play Ma Rainey's Black Bottom directly references the singer as well. And Alice Walker based blues singer Suge Avery and the characters of the Pulitzer Prize winning novel Color Purple on the artists Ma Rainey and Bessie Smith. If anybody asks you who wrote this lonesome song, tell them that you don't know the writer, but Ma Rainey put it on. Thank you. This has been One Mic. I'm your host, Country Boy. As usual, if you like this, please consider donating to my Patreon page or my Buy Me Coffee page. Also consider reviewing us on Apple Podcasts. Give us 5 stars, and peace.